Let's go Mets. Let's go Mets. Let's go Mets. Yeah.
You gotta believe and invest with your heart. Orange and blue till Mets do us part. Spring training, oh yes, it's the start. City Field gritty till Mets do us part. Hit home runs and knock it out the park. Big Apple till Mets do us part. You gotta believe and invest with your heart. Listen to the show till Mets do us part. John from Brooklyn, Ibby reps NJ. With the other team, I don't care what your friends say. Mets fans, we focus like a sensei. Listen to the podcast Monday, Wednesday. Made a couple bad plays, but we still won. Character, yup, we're gonna build some. Are you gonna check the pod? It's real fun. Just like Mookie, I will, son. So invest with your heart. Orange and blue till Mets do us part. Spring training, oh yes, it's the start. City Field gritty till Mets do us part. Hit home runs and knock it out the park. Big Apple till Mets do us part. You gotta believe and invest with your heart. Listen to the show.
Available now on all streaming platforms. If you love the New York Mets, check out Till Mets Do Us Part. Enough rapping. Let's get to yapping.
Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Til Mets Do Us Part, where we are live on YouTube, live on Twitter, like we are each and every single Wednesday. I want to say at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time, but I know we're going to get a lot of comments to the contrary. So let's just say the plan is 5:30 p.m. Eastern time today. A bit late, about 18 minutes or so. But anyway, we are here with you, John Saponaro, from out in sunny, warm Burbank, California. And that means that my co-host, Matt Ibanez, holding things down back on the East Coast in New Jersey. I'm not going to ask you about the weather. I am going to ask you how you're doing, but mostly I'm going to ask you about the condition of your Wi-Fi.
It's a little bit rough at the moment, John. Thank you for asking. As anyone that was watching us last night know that I was struggling with it pretty mightily when we did our collab episode with off-season grades with the guys over at Mets Weekly. But I'm hopeful that it's going to be better. Again, hopeful it's going to be better. We didn't start off that hot, which means we didn't start off on time. But hopefully we can get through a show, have some fun. As always, it's Wednesday. The red light is still on. And I'm ready to mix it up. The chat's starting to fill up. We got about 54 in here so far. I see some familiar faces. I'll allow you to shout them all out. I see some people who haven't been here in a minute, which I'm very pumped to have them here to be able to, chop it up about our Mets, because a lot of good is going on. Of course, we have some bad, and of course, we have some rumor. Like I always say, there's always something to talk about. So let's do it. Wednesday, red lights on. Let's have some fun.
Absolutely. Shout out to everybody in the chat. Let's see who we've got here kicking things off. Stanley Babbage, Darren Rivera. We've got Brad in the house. We've got Edward Wall. We've got Carlos Ramos, Armand, a lot of familiar faces, Ibby, like you said. And that's usually how the show starts. And then it goes up from there with, maybe some new folks that we've never met before, or some, second timers along the way. We got Douglas Barnes. We got Charlie. We got Truman Quinn. Don't want to miss anybody off the top. Try to get to as many folks as I can see as I just scroll down with my mediocre at best eyesight. We have Odd Villain here, whose first comment was simply comment, and I love that. That is very typical of Odd Villain. We got Sydney in the house. Who else is here? I know I saw Keith Blacknick, the media goon. Aaron is here.
Keith's in the building. Shay and
yes,
Sons.
Keith is here. Yeah, shout out to Shay and Sons.
Yeah.
And I think we got Clink as well, and that's about it for the comments coming in so far.
Real quick. Shout out to Clink, who sent me a DM. He mentioned us on Twitter the other day, and then I shot him a DM because I was curious if he was someone who was often in the chat or if he was someone who listened after the fact. Sent me a very nice story about how he found us. It was from a retweet from you. He lives over in Chicago. He's been a Met fan since '84, I believe. He said he was 6 in '84. So just hearing stories like that and how he explained why he liked the show, and it comes back to what we said we wanted the show to be. Two people talking, not much of a script, wanted to feel very authentic, two Mets fans having a heart-to-heart, those therapy sessions types of things. And he echoed all of those things. So when he said it to me, I was very touched, and I liked it because that was the whole idea of the show from the get-go. And here we are, episode 182, and I get to have him here. Say thank you for that. Made my day. So shout out to you, Clink.
Absolutely. And of course, shout out to the Brella Sports Network, which keeps us moving. John Minconi, of course, at the head of that. I do want to get some little bit of housekeeping out of the way because we have a lot to talk about, Ibby, but you see it underneath our logo just to the side of us here, just to the side of Ibby. People asked last week about super chats. Super chats are now available. We were able to get all that stuff sorted and set up. So if you want to guarantee that your question or your comment gets answered and gets discussed, you guys know what to do. That is something that we were, very happy to get to as far as, the continued growth of this show. And we appreciate the continued support from each and every single person who joins the live show, who listens after the fact, who watches after the fact. But of course, in the form of super chats, that's something that really can only happen during the live show. But just shout out to everybody who has helped us get to where we're at now, well over 1,200 subscribers. We're trying to continue to grow, continue to get bigger. And all of that stuff comes from the support of everybody who is rocking with us, every single weekend. So we appreciate that so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And it took a while. There's a lot going on when it comes to setting things up on the YouTube side with monetization and things like that. So I'm very excited that we were finally able to get everything squared away and we're off and running. And again, if you want to, great. We're still going to integrate and work with the chat as we always do. But yeah, little things like that always help us with the continued growth, as John just said. And as always, I'll keep pestering people in the comments to make sure that we are liking the video, subscribing to the channel. And of course, it's basically buy a ticket to get in because you have to sub in order to join the conversation. So hopefully those that are here, sub the channel, let your voice be heard, and we'll get back to you as quickly as we can because we want to hear from every single one of you. But yeah.
I want to jump into the comments. There are some, before we get into like the actual Mets conversation, we've got Keith, the media goon, saying, can the super chats pay for better Wi-Fi?
Hey, if I get enough, if there's
Keith.
enough, you can help me out. I mean, that'd be great.
we got there's so many good ones coming in. We've got Truman Quinn saying, did you try unplugging it and then plugging it back in? Which is exactly what Ibby did. But Ibby, the reason why I started this is because I know I'm like 10 years late to this, but I just finished watching the entire series of the IT Crowd. And that is such a running gag on that show. It's a great British comedy. If you guys have never seen it, but it's super, super, super funny. And that's just a running gag of, have you tried unplugging it and plugging it back in? We got Keith saying, John Internet might be down because it was hacked by Joshua Kuznick, former MLB agent. That saga of my life is thankfully in the rearview mirror. Keith saying, man, this is a worse delay than when the Mets predicting the weather in Flushing. Fair. Brad, I thought Ibby was in the principal's office.
Based off the way that Truman Quinn was roasting me last night in the comments, not liking the grades that were being given out because I mentioned that I am a teacher. It's like, well, the kids must love you if you're grading like this. So maybe I should have been in the principal's office. I don't know.
Maybe. Look, you got Keith saying, welcome to Till Wi-Fi Do Us Part. If that was the case, man, we'd never get this show off the ground. We got Keith Diaz, saying Till Mets Do Us Part running on Steinbrenner Wi-Fi, alluding to the fact that the Yankees are now cheap. Carlos Ramos, John, are you allowed to go outside with that hat? The hat says New York raised me, if you can't see it, in LA. Yeah, I do what I want. I don't really care what anybody thinks. And then Keith, the media goon, says, I was interviewed by Newsday for tomorrow about Cohen's comments about the attendance from last season. That's something that I'm sure we will get to. But shout out to the media goon for being out there in Newsday, and I can't wait to see what his comments are. Keith is not somebody who is shy about expressing his opinion, so I'm sure he was very to the point about it. And you know what? Look,
honest. I'm sure Keith was honest. Yeah,
we go from Keith to Keith. Keith, first super chat,
the first one.
And I appreciate it as a fellow content creator jumping out and doing this thing. Thank you for that. That's really just a nice gesture. Saying opening day, Till Mets Do Us Part, Shea and Sons tailgate. We could work on the logistics of that potentially. I don't know if that's something we can make happen, but we can try.
I was trying to get to opening day this year, but I wasn't able to because my original plan was to go, and then I was asked to be a part of a wedding. So I'm going to a wedding on the day of the home opener for us. But I will be there opening weekend, April 6th, that Sunday game. I will be there for some Sunday fun day. So if anyone's going to be there, I'll keep on reminding you. I'll meet you up there for that.
All right. Well, maybe we can try to work around that schedule. Certainly would work better for me if I tried to get into New York, that weekend or whatever the case may be. But that's something I would like to do, and maybe we can we'll talk about it off air. But yeah, shout out to Keith. That was just a really nice gesture of being the first one to throw that out there. So thank you for that. Ibby, lots to talk about with our New York Mets. Yes. And we can go in a couple different directions. Obviously, you and I spent over 2 hours with the boys over at Mets Weekly last night doing our off-season grades. It was super thorough. Each one of us were able to kind of give our full opinion on where each major move, as far as free agents and trades and stuff in the offseason went. We did also simulcast it on this channel, on our own channel. So if folks want to go back and see that, we're not going to do a grade show here again, either this week or any week before the season starts, because Ibby and I were able to give that full opinion last night. Shout out to Mets Weekly for that. But we also did talk about the fact that, now things are, look, Juan Soto shows up. He's wearing your jersey. He's taking batting practice. He's doing the Soto shuffle. Everything is going to look good. But it's not all great in Mets land, because Frankie Montas gets hurt getting off the fucking plane. I have no idea how you could get hurt so quickly, but he is going to be out 6 to 8 weeks, which means that he is not going to be able to really start the season in earnest. He's going to need a full ramp up as a starting pitcher. So you're looking at late May, maybe June, maybe. So things are not all great as far as Frankie Montas is concerned. And, it certainly puts a damper on what was already a bit of a controversial signing for the Mets.
Yeah, it didn't. And I've talked about this a lot last night. It doesn't help the ones that really were harping and hating on this deal, him to come in as quickly as he did and get injured. And like I said, I shouted out Keith, who's in the comments today. I shouted him out on the show last night as well when he was watching video when Montas was throwing, saying he doesn't look right. It kind of looks like he's pushing the ball. He thought he was bugging out a little bit, but no, Keith was right. He didn't look proper, and things were not going well for him. So he seemed a little bit more optimistic after that PRP shot today. News came out that he thinks it might be a little bit more towards 4 weeks on the earlier end as opposed to 6. We'll see what happens. We know a lot of times when it comes to the Mets and these types of injuries, it always ends up being the latter as opposed to the former. So I'm still, feeling we're not going to see Frankie until late June. If I'm being like as optimistic as I can, I say. So
you think late June? You're even going further.
I do. Okay. I do. Because when it comes to stuff like this, there's always hiccups along the way and then ramping up and then setbacks. Like, I'm always nervous when it comes to injuries like this. So I'm always thinking, I'm thinking towards the latter. I always am.
It's funny because I also think look, you might be right. You might be wrong. It doesn't matter really as far as the conversation is concerned. But you're right where there always seems to be extra time tacked on. Like, Armand says, Montas himself said 4 to 6 weeks. I think it's really more 6 to 8 for something like this. And then you have the possibility of some other setbacks, some other things getting in the way. And that's what I was about to say, where especially with starting pitchers, it just seems like when they're trying to do a full spring training ramp up, when it's no longer spring training, that just always takes longer than it would if it was the regular routine that happens in late February and throughout March. I don't have any numbers to back that up. This is not some scientific hypothesis to that end, but it just feels like every time a pitcher does not start the season, that they're just not quite able to do it in the time that it should take were it February and March. Does that make sense?
No, I get what you're saying completely. And you're right. A lot of times it just feels like whenever you're waiting on bated breath, like we were last year when it came to Senga, when he was going to be getting back and waiting for information. And then it just seems like it kept on getting pushed back another week. It seems very, very rushed a lot of times, and then things happen. It's never pretty. That's why I'm saying, like, I'm I'm erring on the side of I'm not expecting to see him for a while. I'm leaving it at that. And if he comes back sooner, great. That's fantastic. It helps the it helps the bullpen. It helps this potential of a 6-man rotation, which I think it's very difficult for us to get to that 6-man right now as constituted. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. But I just think that something like this, I think the Mets can be very.
Oh no.
No, I'm here.
Well,
Am I here?
Oh,
very,
kinda.
very,
You're back.
very cautious. Okay, I'm back. And I'll leave it at that and toss it back to you before I die again.
I'll jump into the comments really quick because I do want to hit on these. Shout out to Darren Rivera saying, let the boys get to 1.3K before the end of the month on the super chat. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
Then Brad with the super sticker. Thank you for that. And then
Thanks, Brad.
This one from Keith, which is the most timely of them all. I have to contribute to the Wi-Fi on the $5 super.
Thank you to the Media Goon. I might get some decent Wi-Fi. All right.
No, look, I think we should talk about how it affects the Mets rotation plans because look, we spent so much time yesterday on the grades and on the injury conversation with the folks from Mets Weekly. I was not shy about the fact that I was trying to decide whether or not I was going to let this injury hurt the grade that I would have given Frankie Montas' signing. And I ultimately decided that you have to, because a lot of things get affected by the trickle down of this injury. One, he has a player option for next year. If there's a situation where or an opt-out, opt-in, you know what I mean? If there's a situation where he doesn't pitch until June or late June, or like Armand says, July, whatever, he ain't opting out. So then you have Frankie Montas, for better or for worse, at $17 million for next season. Now that gives you some assurances. You know you have a controlled cost, whatever the thing might be. But if you were trying to get out from that, well, now all of a sudden it's going to be so much harder for you to do that. The fact that he's hurt, even if he comes back on a quick timetable of 4 to 6 weeks, I think you still have to worry about whether or not he's going to opt out, because he's not going to have a full season. He's not going to have a normal season as a starting pitcher. And this is a guy who has dealt with injuries in the past. So I think that does have to affect the grade that you would give this signing. Now, I have also said you have to give Stearns the benefit of the doubt, because not only last year with Manaea and Severino, but in his entire tenure with the Milwaukee Brewers, he was really good at finding diamonds in the rough. He was really good at identifying players in the market, but you also have to acknowledge that it isn't always going to work. Now, we'll see if this is going to work with Frankie Montas, but as of right now, it is not off to a great start. So, it's a little bit of both. I think ultimately I wound up giving this like a D or a D minus or whatever I said. I don't remember exactly. I didn't write any of it down after the fact, but it's not a good look. And I think the other main reason is the trickle down of this 6-man rotation. When you want to go with a 6-man rotation, a true 6-man, not a, we've got Griffin Canning and he's in the bullpen, and he's a long reliever, middle reliever. But when we're in a bind, we're going to go to an extra guy. When we have a doubleheader or a lot of games in a row, we'll get him in there. He'll start the game. Maybe we'll back him up with Jose Buto. We'll get through it. This is what you have to do to get through 162. That's a different situation. When you're talking about a legitimate situation like the one that we're looking at, where you want to go to a 6-man rotation for the bulk of the season, you need quality arms to do that. Now, you could argue, some of you might say, Frankie Montas isn't a quality arm. He's a major league arm.
Right.
He is a legitimate major league starting pitcher, and you need to have more of them. I know this sounds dumb, but you need to have more of them tangibly to have a 6-man rotation as opposed to a 5-man. So I think the trickle down that this causes is really the worst part of it, because can you justify, if you're the Mets, slotting Tyler McGill into a 6-man rotation? I don't know that you can. Can you justify slotting Paul Blackburn into a 6-man rotation, or Griffin Canning, or, some?
Well, it would be both of them at this point for a 6-man.
I guess it would be both of them. Yeah, that's my point.
Yeah.
Is that I don't know that you could justify that. I think between the 3 guys, Blackburn, Canning, and McGill, one of them, okay, fine. But now two of them, are those quality arms enough to get to a six-man? I don't know that it is. And when you're dealing with Senga coming off of the injury, when you're dealing with Minaya coming off of the most innings pitched that he has, I think, in the last 5 years, and the second most he's ever pitched in his career, and you're looking at an innings limit for a guy like Clay Holmes transitioning to a starter, I think he's going to be really good, but he's only going to give you 130-ish innings max. So, I think the trickle-down effect of Frankie Montas being hurt, even if it's just for a few weeks to start the season in the best-case scenario, is a very, 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 very big blow to the way this team wanted to start, even though he was probably going to be whatever, your third, your fourth, your fifth starter, whatever, however you wanted to roll him out, Ibby. I don't think you can minimize what this injury means right now to this rotation.
And like I've always been saying, this team needs innings, and that's why he got the money that he got, because he provides set innings. Now that you don't have them, you're asking people, if you stay in-house, you're asking the likes of Canning, McGill, or Blackburn to provide more, put them in a spot that they weren't expected to be in right off the rip, and that puts a lot of stress on things. So when you're putting more stress on the bullpen, potentially this early in the season, that's where these problems start to begin. And that's where John is saying, like, that whole trickle-down effect. Like, and I agree with it wholeheartedly, because the whole thing for this person was he provides innings. He can go out there and give you the six and protect you on every fifth day. Like, that was the whole point of it.
You could argue that's his best asset.
It is. And
his best asset. The reason why he got $17 million, which I think was a fair deal, it was like $1 million raise from last year, is because of the innings. He got $17 million and not 12 or 13 or 11 or whatever, because of his ability to eat innings, Ibby. So yeah, I think you're onto something there.
Yeah, it's the innings. It's the fact his second half numbers definitely played a part of that with Milwaukee and the strikeout rate. Like, they look at all these things and they think that they can extrapolate and make more of it. So they jumped the market. They did what they did, and they thought it was going to work. And right now it hasn't. It clearly hasn't worked yet. So we have to see eventually what happens if he can get healthy and what he can provide after an injury like this. We don't know, but it's an unfortunate thing to happen. Do I think it's the end of the world? I don't. Does it put strain? Absolutely. But again, you go out there, you sign offense, score runs, protect the pitching, protect it on the back end. That's how you're going to work your way through this. And of course, I want to also say, if you haven't already, make sure in the chat, I did post a poll, 31 votes so far. How would you handle the Frankie Montas injury? Would you stay in-house with Griffin Canning, Tyler McGill, and Paul Blackburn, or would you sign Quintana? 31 votes so far. Right now, it's a heavy lean. Sign Quintana at 71%. Stay in-house at 29%. If you haven't, make sure you vote.
Well, speaking of, let's jump back into the comments really quick. First, from Brad, thank you for the super chat, $4.99. Just got 5 on the Wi-Fi as well, so thank you for that. But then this one, Brad. Biggest one that we've gotten to this point, which we appreciate, and it comes with a question, or rather a comment to the end of what you were just talking about, Ibby, from Hebrew Hammer, $20. Thank you, Hebrew Hammer.
Thank you so much, Hebrew. Thank you.
All this talk about Cease. He's a very good pitcher, no doubt. Take this into consideration. Jose Quintana has a lower career ERA than Cease. Bring him back. He is an innings eater and is reliable, plus no prospects. So you already mentioned Jose Quintana. You already mentioned the poll. You already mentioned that most people, 30 some odd votes, said they would go the way of Quintana to this point. I don't think this is, on the surface, a bad idea. I don't. Because I just said, if you want to roll out a 6-man rotation legitimately, you do need 6 major league caliber starting pitchers. And I'm not sure, when you factor in the up and down nature of Tyler McGill's career, the injury to Paul Blackburn and the severity of it. I didn't even know the injury, the likes of which he had, was possible for a human being to still be alive, but I'm not a doctor, so here we are. And when you talk about Griffin Canning, who's been, based on ERA, was the worst pitcher in baseball last year, you can make the clear argument that you do not have 6 legitimate starting pitchers to roll out this rotation, and Quintana would help to that end. My only knock against this whether it's Quintana or pick your flavor of pitcher who is like Quintana that is out there on the free agent market. Look, you guys know I am not the type of person that cares about penny pinching. I am not the type of person that is ever going to advocate for not paying a player. But because of where the Mets payroll is, because of where their luxury tax hit is, whatever they sign a player like Quintana to, it's going to be a 1-year deal. So it is going to be essentially double whatever the deal is. Now, he made what? It'd be $13 million last year?
Yeah, he's not getting close to that.
No, but is he going to make 10, 7? What's he going to make? Whatever he is, it's times 2. And remember, it's not even about not wanting to pay him. It's the fact that he doesn't even get the second half of that. So if it's a $5 million deal, just for argument's sake, it's basically a $10.5 million deal. Right. If it's a $10 million deal, now you're talking it's basically $20 million. And I don't know that you can start to justify those numbers for Quintana or a pitcher of the like. And I said as much last night on our simulcast with Mets Weekly. I would rather, now I don't know if these players are truly available, Dylan Cease, Michael King, whatever, but I would rather absorb a contract like Cease and pay more in the luxury tax because the upside is higher. Quintana was a dog for us in the second half of the year and into the playoffs. But there was a time in the middle part of the season where he was in danger of being DFA'd. Do you want to pay, for argument's sake, double, let's call it, $15 million for Quintana and then DFA him because he's not good anymore? It's possible that happens, Ibby. So it's not a knock on him. His career ERA is lower than Dylan Cease, yes, but he is clearly on the back 9. Look, if the Mets go out and they feel that they need to do this, I'm not going to be up in arms because I do want the team to just have better players. Yeah. But I don't know if it's the right way to invest the money. I don't. For me, I can't confidently say it is.
If it's that much money, like if he's asking for like a base of like $7-8 million, it won't happen. Like Carson said it in our group chat, he's going to have to sign for less than what Griffin Canning got, like around $4 million. So it's
Griffin Canning got $4.25 million.
So is Quintana going to be willing to bite the bullet to go from $13 million last year to making $3 million this year? Call that 6 against the thing for us. Like, I don't know if he will. To this comment by Hebo, and again, thank you for the super chat, much appreciated. The difference there between the two is obviously Cease can strike people out. Quintana nibbles. Quintana got eaten alive by the Dodgers because they don't chase. Cease can strike people out. Like, that's the main difference. He's high odds when it comes to projections for strikeouts this year. I would pay the prospects it would take to get a Dylan Cease on this team. That's the main difference between the two. And obviously the availability that Cease has had, the amount of starts that he's made over the last now 4 seasons of making 30 plus starts in a given year, like that's what you're paying for with those prospects. So that's something that I would do as opposed to just paying call it on the low end, 3 million, really 6 million for a Quintana. Do I understand why Mets fans would want a Quintana right now? Because
I do.
What they're seeing, I get it. I wholeheartedly understand. Do I think it's the right way to invest money? Probably not. Are there other guys similar to him that you could probably get for even cheaper than Quintana? Most likely. But I understand why Quintana wants to come back. He knows people. He loved the vibes and everything. He established himself, probably living situation, all those things considered, probably makes sense for him. That's why he wants to do it. It comes down to what's the price that you're asking for. Yeah. In a vacuum, I understand it. Would I run out of my way to do this? I wouldn't, and I still believe that the Mets are going to stay in-house when it comes to the options that I gave. I think ultimately that they will stay in-house unless Quintana says, I'll come play for, like I said, $3 million, which I don't think he's going to do.
I just don't think he's going to do it. Look, guys' markets are what they are, right? And if he's not getting nibbles anywhere else, then, $3 million, all of us regular folk, it's nothing to sneeze at, right? Whatever he's going to make. But there is also like a professional pride expectation of what you made last year. Now, again, I understand you'd rather make something than nothing. If your option is play for the Mets for $3 million or retire or go play overseas and hope or whatever, or take a minor league deal and hope. Yeah, you'd rather have the guaranteed money, a bird in the hand situation. But again, he made $13 million last year. Asking him to sign for $3 million this year that's a massive pay cut, especially when, yes, he was abysmal in the first half, but he finished so strong. Now, again, was a lot of that with smoke and mirrors? Yeah, that's what his stuff is now. He throws 88, 89 mile an hour fastballs. He's got to be perfect. A part of the reason why the Mets moved from Quintana to Frankie Montas is because even if they were both your fifth starters, they looked at it and they said, well, Frankie Montas has better stuff. Frankie Montas has a better arm. Yeah. He strikes people out. He has swing and miss stuff. All of that stuff is true, despite the ERA, despite the whatever else. So there was a reason why the Mets moved on from him in the first place. Look, I want to jump back into the comments on a couple of these. Brad says, I would try to defer that payment. The thing is that even worth it? You know what I mean? Like when you start to talk about like giving him like a, sort of like the JD Martinez contract, like you pay, and I know JD Martinez did not have a good year. He had a couple of good stretches. But you paid JD Martinez to be your everyday DH. This is a guy you're going to pay to be your sixth starter. Is that really worth it? I don't know that even deferrals are worth it at that point. John says, Montas is a fifth starter. The Mets will be fine. No need to panic. I don't want to sound like we're up in a panic here. We're not. It is just it does create a very tangible hole for this team that you don't like to see right out of the gate. If it was like, I got a hangnail, I'm going to miss 2 weeks, it wouldn't matter. But like a lat is a big deal, and it's a big deal for a pitcher, and it could be a long time. So I don't think the sky is falling, but I do think you have to acknowledge that like, it just kind of sucks to get off to that kind of a start in your rotation. And then Ibby, before I toss it back to you, just two more here. Carlos Ramos saying, we're talking about eating innings. We should sign Quintana for that. So he's obviously in that camp. We cannot overwork this bullpen early. If we do, it will come back to hurt us late in the season. We cannot tax the bullpen. I agree with the not taxing the bullpen part, but again, I just don't know what Quintana is going to give you. And when you really don't want this guy going a third time through the order under any circumstances at all, and he has to be a nibbler and he has to be perfect to get guys out. Can't you see a lot of situations where his pitch count is high early and he's not really providing you relief anyway? I know he's got the kind of arm that can give you innings, but will he have the kind of effectiveness that can give you innings? And last one before I toss it to you, Ibby, Pentrese saying, I do not want to pay around $20 million for Q, assuming that it was a $10 million deal with the Cohen tax of 110%. Do people forget how awful he was in the first half? He had maybe 2 good months in the second half. Sure, he was great in the postseason, but no. So I think there are good arguments to be made on both sides. Again, it's not my money. If the Mets want to spend it on Quintana, that's fine. It's just, if I were David Stearns, if I were running a team, it is not what I would do. And I know a lot of people don't want to hear this. I had to bite the inside of my cheek when I said it last night on our other show. I think it's going to be Tylor Megill in the short term. I think that's what you're looking at. And I think that's going to be fine because I can't guarantee you that Quintana will be better than Tylor Megill in 2025.
Yeah, and I just want to bring up Pantrese's other comment that she put over here saying, I think that she thought I was underestimating the cost for C's. Padres would want Acuna, Sproat at least. You probably have to add in McGill or Buto, Beatty along with him and another 2 prospects. Like, I understand that it would be expensive, but the point I was just trying to make in comparison to what Hebrew was saying was, I didn't think it was fair to really comp those 2 pitchers because of what they really provide from a overall perspective. And I think Cease is a much more better pitcher. So I would pay the cost. I understand what the Padres are asking for. Doesn't necessarily mean that the Padres are going to get it. And because before the season starts, at this point at least, they're not going to get what they think they're going to get come the deadline. So it's going to be even less because a team's only going to have that player for 2 months. Can Dylan Cease still end up on this team? At some point, maybe. Am I going to really pay big money right now to bring it all back for Jose Quintana? I don't think that I am. I don't see it being that much of a help overall. If they do it, I get it. Not my money, as John said. but is it really going to save the day for us? Is Jose Quintana going to put that cape on and save us? I'm with Pantrese on this, where it's being said that he was terrible. I had graphics made up that I used on this show that I had a segment for that had Jose Quintana on a rocket, and I had rocket noises in the background sending him off to space because I was done with him because he was terrible. And yes, he turned it around right after I did that. So, I'm thankful for what he provided, but is lightning going to strike twice again? I don't know. I understand why Mets fans see it. The last thing they saw with him and how he provided for us in the playoffs, but I'm not so sure if that's going to be what you get moving forward.
Yeah, I think all that's true. Speaking of space, it looks like your video feed is coming from space right now. You look like you're on the moon currently. There's a little bit of a lag between your motions and your mouth is moving and the words are coming out later. You're doing the best you can, man. You're doing the best you can. I do want to bring this one up from Danny J, who I think is new to the show. If you are, welcome, Danny. If this is just your first time commenting, welcome back. But welcome to this portion of the show where you can get your voice heard, saying the Yankees are looking to dump Stroman and eat some of the salary. Not a terrible option, in my opinion, if they pay for most of it. While Ibby sorts through his mess, look, I don't want to give this too much credence. We all know Marcus Stroman wears out his welcome everywhere he goes. Marcus Stroman wore out his welcome here. He wore out his welcome with the Yankees. He wore out his welcome in Toronto. There was a time when I defended Marcus Stroman, and there are things that I will still defend Marcus Stroman on, whether you guys agree or disagree. I think that, flashy, outspoken African-American athletes get a lot more flack than they deserve in some cases. So there are things that I still don't think Marcus Stroman is necessarily wrong about. However, Marcus Stroman is problematic in clubhouses. Marcus Stroman does raise a lot of hell around teams. Now, if you told me, and this will never happen because, again, he wore out his welcome here, he ain't coming back. But just as a hypothetical, Ibby, if you told me that the Yankees would be willing to take Jeff McNeil for Marcus Stroman, I would make that deal. I think that would make the Mets a better team. It would also open up roster spots. It would also allow the Mets to bring back Jose Iglesias, which a lot of people want. It would allow Acuna or Jet Williams or Brett Beatty or Ronnie Mauricio to have a legit shot at becoming an everyday player on the team in 2025. It would make them younger. It would make them more athletic. You would get a better backup. You'd get a better story. You'd get a cheaper option with Jose Iglesias coming back. And the only thing you'd have to do is kind of pinch your nose and deal with Marcus Stroman for a bit. But also Marcus Stroman would provide you with that quality major or just true major league starter that you needed back in your rotation. It will never happen, but that's the only way that I would be on board for this to happen.
It seems like my connection's still pretty crappy, so I apologize. I'm going to keep trying to work through it. But even with that, John, as much as we don't like McNeil and we have our questions about like the likes of Marte as well, I would never, ever bring back Marcus Stroman. I can't do it. I can't. I understand everything you're saying, but I just feel that everything that he brings, like you said, wears out his welcome and things of that nature. I just feel that it's something that is a giant red flag for a team that has vibes off the, out of this world right now from what we're seeing. The last thing I would want to do is to bring a problematic player like that here. And he didn't have the nicest of things to say. I know it was a different regime. I get that.
Sure,
but at the same time, I don't think that it is a player that is worthy of being brought back, even though it makes sense from a player perspective on what they are and what this team could use. I just don't think that it is a player that is worth the headache. That's all.
Listen, that's my point, just to be clear. I see all the comments from everybody saying, absolutely not, keep this guy away from the team. People like Charlie saying, hey, I want McNeil off the team, but, I would even keep McNeil over Stroman. Look, I see all those comments. Look, again, I'm going to move on. It's not going to happen. Just as a thought exercise, because somebody brought it up, I do understand why someone would bring it up. And I think, Ibby, it would be more likely to happen if Stroman had the exact same reputation and the exact same history, but he had just never played for the Mets. Do you know what I'm saying? Had he not literally already wore his welcome out here, I think you could make a bigger case for it.
No, I agree. I think that there's still the sour taste, and I can admit that I still have an extremely sour taste. And even when my Yankee friends, they messaged me like, "Hey, why don't you just do like Marte for Stroman straight up? They need an outfielder. You need a pitcher." I'm like, no. I've been there. I've done that. I don't want it. Enjoy him. You got him. You thought he was going to be some hero for you. At the time, I told you, good luck. God, good luck. God bless. But I just, no. That's all I got. Really. It's that rough for me. I can't.
Yeah.
Like everything, how it ended, it was so bitter. The things that he said afterwards, the things that he says on social media, blah blah blah, blah, all that stuff. It's too much for me. I love where this team is right now in terms of the overall clubhouse culture that they've been trying to create for the longest time. It finally feels like it's there. And I just think that this is literally like injecting a poison into it. I know my name says poison down there, but this is, a decent kind. Him, not the good kind.
The last thing I'll say about this is that I will also admit that normally when you say like, oh, this isn't MLB The Show, it has to do with like big trades of like, I'll trade these 3 prospects with X rating for prime Mike Trout. And you're like, that only works in video games. Like it doesn't work in real life. And here's why. I will admit that me answering this question and furthering this conversation, it really only works in fantasy baseball. It really only works in MLB The Show, where the personalities don't matter, where what happened in the past doesn't matter, where it's like, oh, well, team need for team need. Yeah, that could make sense. But I do acknowledge that it doesn't super make sense for the Mets. But I did think it was worthy to talk about for at least a moment. Darren Rivera with a super chat, but I want to hold off on it for 1 second. Darren, don't go anywhere, because I want to use that as a segue. I want to get to this one from James Rube first, just because I think chronologically it makes more sense to hit this and then move on to Darren's. James says, are we relying too much on Stearns' pitching lab for our rotation? Do we foresee ourselves being really aggressive at the deadline for an elite arm? Ibby, I think we should take this in 2 parts, and then we'll segue into Darren's comment. So I want just your thoughts on the first part of this one from James. Are we relying too much on Stearns' pitching lab for the rotation? Your thoughts?
I think it's something that requires patience, because other teams do this exact same thing and they get lauded for it and they get respect for it, whether it's the Clevelands, the Rays of the world, the San Francisco Giants. Like, they get praise for doing things like this, but
universally.
Am I here?
Yeah, you're here.
Okay. But ultimately, they get respect for that. But when it comes to the Mets, it's like, this isn't working, blah, blah, blah. You're relying too much. As you have to go out there, you got to sign these big pitchers. You got to do this, you got to do that. And it's like, I understand where you're coming from, but this is something that literally just worked. You saw it happen for Minaya and Severino, and we're trying to do this yet again. And people are like, nope, you screwed up. You should have went after. You should have signed this. You should have signed that. And it's like, I understand why you're a little bit frustrated, but something like this does take time, and he's trying to create and cultivate that he can become a pitching lab. Now, if it fails here, it's 50-50. Then 1 year it works, the next year it doesn't. Now you can start having a little bit of a back and forth, but I have to be able to see it through, because we have no idea yet. So that's why I can't say that it's relying too much, because the season hasn't even started yet, and we haven't even seen anything. So we don't know what we're going to get from Holmes yet. We don't know what we're going to get from the Griffin Cannings of the world. And obviously the Montas thing, we'll see what happens if he does come back. But we have to allow it to play out, and then we can eventually judge. Same way I said last year going into the season, like, I'm not going to grade David Stearns just yet. I'm going to grade him if he is able to do the things that the previous regime wasn't able to do. Pivot off of something and admit when he made a mistake, which he did. And if the same thing happens here, I expect him to be able to pivot off and fix the mistake.
Yeah, look, I think you're spot on with regards to that. I think because this pitching lab concept is new for us as fans, as Mets fans, because the Wilpons did not invest in infrastructure. We all always talk about just, oh man, we missed out on Zach Wheeler, bringing him back because of the Wilpons. Oh man, we could have went out and had A-Rod in his prime, but we didn't because the Wilpons wouldn't go the extra mile. We could have had Vladimir Guerrero, but the Wilpons wouldn't go the extra mile. Manny Ramirez, the list goes on and on and on and on. That's all true. But you could argue that a bigger sin of the Wilpons was not modernizing the way the rest of the league did. They didn't put any money into their infrastructure, into their analytics, into their drafting, into their development. The reason why the Rays work as a backdrop with the rest of the league seemingly moving past them, spending all this money, is because they did pivot. They did spend all this money on drafting, developing, pitching labs. How do we get the best bang for buck? So it's a new concept to have this lab and to have this thought process. And again, another new thought process for us as Mets fans is Steve Cohen, the guy with all the money. Well, why don't we just invest big? Look, the Mets' biggest issue right now in the starting rotation is that before David Stearns got here, there was a revolving door of GMs while Steve Cohen was trying to get David Stearns that didn't do shit with regards to drafting and developing starting pitching. The best way to succeed in the rotation is to develop starting pitchers and pay them early. If you start paying guys when they're 30 years old, it is a huge, huge problem. There's basically one deal that has worked out in the history of Major League Baseball. That is Max Scherzer's contract with the Washington Nationals, and a few other ones that have worked out pretty good. Garrett Cole with the Yankees, although that takes a hit because they haven't won a World Series yet. And probably CC Sabathia with the Yankees. And even though they did win, that's the ultimate boost there. He was not the same pitcher at certain points in that contract, had to reinvent himself, really hit a bit of a downturn before finishing strong yet again. So these investments are not typically good. And the only thing I'll add, Ibby, on top of this to what you said is the reason why these investments aren't good long-term in pitchers 30 years old and beyond is because all pitchers can get hurt. So does this suck that we have Frankie Montas on what is essentially a one-year deal, but let's call the deal what it is, a 2-year, $34 million deal, the option in between the 2 years. Does it suck that he got hurt? Yes. Would it have sucked more, though, if we signed Corbin Burns for a 6-year, $210 million contract with an average annual value of $35 million and he hurt his lat? It would have. And Ibby, does the $210 million mean that Corbin Burns is impervious to hurting his lat in spring training? It doesn't.
No, not at all.
That's
not
the one
all.
that fucks you. This one, it sucks. It sets you back. It does not sink the ship. Corbin Burns getting that injury, that would sink the ship. Max Fried, if you were the Mets and you spent big money on Max Fried to come in and try to be your ace, that sinks the ship. This other deal doesn't sink the ship. So that's the thing you really need to kind of have the whole perspective on. The second part of this, Ibby, do you foresee them being aggressive at the deadline for an elite arm? Early,
I think it's,
but a worthwhile question.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's dependent on the market, who's available. I do think that certain teams come the deadline are going to feed the contenders because they're going to have assets that they're trying to sell, whether that is the Padres, if they are going to move off of Cease or a King, whether it is the Cardinals, if they're getting rid of the likes of Fetty or Sonny Gray or other teams that we don't even know of yet that fall out of the race and they're putting guys out there to become available. Will the Mets be aggressive? I think it's dependent on the time. If anyone saw, and I watched it this morning, David Stearns was on Meet at the Apple, the official Mets podcast, and they were asking questions, and he had mentioned, like, when it comes to the idea, like the same conversation we had when it came to aces, they were talking about that, and he was saying, look, when it comes to pitchers, and he's 100% spot on this, It's about the timing aspect, what you get from a given player at a given time. You're praying essentially at this position now that you're getting quality innings or ace-like production when it's proper, meaning are the arms churning at the right time? Basically, he was reiterating, when the season's going on, you're basically trying to survive the season. Then when you have the remaining time in the playoffs, can those arms find it and keep moving forward? He brought up the Dodgers, as we all have been bringing up for the longest time. They came into last year with this idea of a starting rotation. And by the time they got to the end line, their ace was Jack Flaherty, who signed with Detroit for a 1-year deal, who then signs the small deal to go back to Detroit this year. And it's like, it was just a timing aspect. Every pitching staff becomes a mash unit by the time the season's, near the end legs of a season. So I understand his whole point where it's like, you're literally just trying to get there. Will they try to deal for someone? I think it is definitely on the table. I do think that these prospects are going to reestablish themselves and reestablish value. And by the time the midseason rolls around, by the time the deadline gets here, I think Stearns and the entire front office is going to have a much better idea with these guys being healthy, God willing, but them being healthy. Are they proper? Are they taking to what we are teaching? Do they make sense for this system? And if they are doing well, are we willing to part, which I think that they will? Can we part with some of these guys to get us over the finish line, in our opinion, for a pitcher? I do think it's possible. Who that pitcher is, I don't know yet, but I do believe that they will push for someone when it's needed.
Yeah, look, you said pretty much everything that needs to be said with regards to this. I don't want to hedge or be dismissive of this comment, which is a really good 2-part question from James Rube, but yeah. I'll just say this. If the Mets need to be aggressive for an elite arm at the deadline, they will be. This is the start of the all-in chips kind of year. Now, it takes 2 to tango. We've seen that at deadlines before. We saw that with the less than adequate deadline that brought us, Darren Ruff and Tyler Naquin and all those folks. We also saw it at the deadline last year where, look, a lot of those additions weren't sexy, but man, they really helped. They really helped get us there. Jesse Winker came over. He was not a great hitter for the Mets over the course of the regular season. He was great in the postseason. Ryan Stanek came over, was not good at all, really, in the regular season, nails in the postseason like he is every year. Flip side of that, they get Phil Maton early. Phil Maton, bad down the stretch, bad in the playoffs. But I don't know if we even make the playoffs without Phil Maton. So, you go out and you get some of these players and you reinvent your team a bit on the fly. It does take 2 to tango, but I think last year the Mets were in a weird situation where, they were in it, but they needed help and they went out and they got help. But also, who were these unbelievable lights out players that got moved at the deadline last year? There really weren't any. Now, this year, I think there's potential to be more, especially in the starting rotation. And I think that, yes, if the Mets, because I think that will be their biggest problem. I think their lineup is deep and their lineup is very good. They also have some top prospects who are close that can help fill in case of injury or ineffectiveness or whatever the case may be, that can help in the lineup and in the everyday player portion of their team. I think this is the deepest bullpen the Mets have built to start a season in a very long time. So I think, if there is a problem with this team, there is going to be a problem in the starting rotation. If the Mets feel that they are an elite arm away, and let's just say the Padres are bad, they're the 3rd or 4th team in that division, the Mets will swing a trade if they can. Now, I don't know if they can match up and all that stuff, but the Mets will be aggressive to answer this question. If the Mets are a starting pitcher, an elite arm away, they will be aggressive in making a move. That I can almost guarantee, just based on the way this team is set up right now. So with that, Ibby, let's transition really quick. I just pulled this up from Danny J, who I think it was his first comment. says, thanks for entertaining my question. I get it, and I agree with you guys with regards to Marcus Stroman. Just a thought as it was an option that was out there. Yeah, thank you for the question. Thank you for the comment. I think it was good. I think it was good, thought-provoking. Yeah, we never have an issue entertaining, questions or comments here. So shout out to you for being new to the show. So as promised, Darren, thank you for the super chat, a $4.99er from you. Thank you. Saying, are there even any pitchers that won't cost us Sproat that are available? And then we will take the second part of this question after the break. So just for right now, are there any pitchers available? I'm going to add to this right now or at the deadline that do not cost us Sproat. In a word, I would say yes.
Yes, 1,000% yes. Because like I said before, you can ask for the moon all you want, but I don't think the Mets are going to part with him regardless. And I don't think teams are going to be pushing that hard at the deadline. They can try, but a lot of times when teams know there's pressure against them, they want to see if someone will break. I don't think Stearns is going to break and part with him. And there are pitchers that will be available that are not going to cost him. And look, at that point, if the Padres at the deadline think that they can get, you got to give me Sproat to get Cease, well, then I don't think the Mets are going to get Cease because they're not going to do that, because at that point, I'm not sure it makes all the sense in the world. But I would say that there are going to be arms available, and it might end up being the approach that people don't like, where it's not considerably an ace in their eyes, but how many aces will be dealt at the deadline? I don't know. I have to see what goes on with Sandy Alcantara. I'm not sure. I'm going to see what goes on with Dylan Cease and Michael King. I'm going to see what goes on with some of these other, like Sonny Gray or Eric Fetty, like some guys higher ranked than others.
I'll throw Luis Castillo back in the mix. I'll throw Jordan Montgomery back in the mix.
There's plenty of guys that could
Zach
be
Gallen, right? Zach Gallen's a free agent after this year.
There's plenty of guys that could be available, and it's going to be all dependent on where teams are, who's in the race, who falls out of the race, guys that are going to become available that you don't even know of. I'm telling you, there are going to be certain teams that are going to be selling off that you don't even realize, and it's going to be interesting to watch. But I do think that they can find pitching that can definitely help this team that will not cost Brendan Sproat. I'm very confident when I say that.
Going to go back to this comment from Darren in a second, but Keith, the media goon, saying, Sproat for Cease, the Mets will get a cease and desist. I do like that thought process. Richard Zucker saying Castillo is a pitcher that may be available that likely would not cost you the likes of Brendan Sproat. Armand saying, the answer is yes. They're called free agents, which is also in the truest form of the word.
I really hope
that is very accurate.
I really hope that Seattle just really shits the bed this year. And I feel bad because Seattle has great fans, but I feel bad for them because this team really fumbled the ball this offseason with what they could have done to help that pitching staff. And I hope that they fall out of it because honestly, I think Houston is still going to compete strong in the West. I think the Rangers are going to come back roaring this year. I really do. I think they're going to make a lot of noise in the AL this season, and I think they make a lot of noise in the West, obviously. So I really think that the Mariners can fall out of it, and I think he will become available. They can ask for the world all they want, but I don't know if anyone's going to give it to him based off of the numbers that Castillo has had over the last 2 seasons, how they've been coming down a little bit. People worry about wear and tear a little bit. I still love the guy. I would take him in a heartbeat, but I think that they're going to have to bring down that ask if they're going to want to try to get better offensively. I do think that is an avenue that can happen, but ultimately, I hope Seattle really, really shits the bed because at this rate, they deserve it for being so awful with how they handled their offseason.
They do. Seattle is akin to me of, commentary that I made weeks and weeks ago about the Baltimore Orioles, but I think it's actually worse because the Baltimore Orioles have not effectively, in my mind, replaced anything that they lost because they went in an odd direction in terms of being a bit cheaper to do it rather than taking bigger swings. They were the perfect team to come out and take a big swing to just keep Corbin Burnes. Now, I talked about how I think it's a bad ROI to sign players like Corbin Burnes. I still stand by that, but when he's already on your team and you're a team that has so much cost certainty and young players, and you've been bad for so long, and you've got a new owner who said that they're going to spend money, that's the kind of team that says, screw it, throw caution to the wind, give Corbin Burnes $200 million. But I digress. Seattle's been even worse because they haven't even made any moves to be better. Like, at least Baltimore, I don't agree with the moves, but they've made some. Seattle has maybe the best pitching staff, the best starting pitching in baseball. At least, they have the talent to be that good, but they have no offense to speak of, Ibby. Outside of maybe two players, their offense is abysmal. Their infield is, it's people I've never heard of. So I think it's very possible that this does drop off a cliff for them. I think if you put a gun to my head, I think Texas Rangers probably win that division this year. And I think Houston just has a pedigree. They know how to win, man. The front office knows how to win. Management knows how to win. The players that are still there know how to win. I think they'll probably finish second. So I think you're talking about Seattle being, maybe a distant third. And if that's the case, that would potentially help the Mets, to your point, as far as that's concerned. And look, the last thing I'll say before we head into the break, and then we will take the second half of this question and the other super chat that we have lying in wait, we will get to coming up in a moment as well. Ibby, I said it before and I say it again. It takes two to tango. I just think that the Mets system is not necessarily as good as, some of the top upper echelon systems. So yes, people will ask for Brandon Sproat, even if it's in a deadline deal. But David Stearns knows that is the only chip he has to play with regards to not spending a fuck ton on starting pitching. So he is not going to give up Brandon Sproat. So if Brandon Sproat is the difference between them getting Dylan Cease or Luis Castillo or whomever, they're not going to trade Brandon Sproat. And while I agree that sometimes you got to push your chips to the middle of the table, when you only have one of something, I don't think you can afford to do it. So if he is the difference in them getting someone, then they won't get that person because they're not going to give up Sproat, and they shouldn't because of how costly it is to go out and buy pitching.
I also think that Brandon Sproat is going to be in this rotation and make upwards of 15 starts this season. So I don't think he's going to be dealt away because I think he's going to be a big part as to the winning for this team this year. So I don't see him going anywhere.
I agree. So as promised, we'll head into the break. We're just at an hour, basically the halfway mark. If you're watching live for the first time, you're like, I don't want to sit through a break. Don't worry. It is just a quick 30-second ad spot that we need for the audio version of the show. It also allows us to kind of reset the conversation a little bit, take a little bit of an exhale. So don't go anywhere. It's John Saponaro. It's Matt Ibanez. It's Til Mets Do Us Part, live on YouTube, live on Twitter, all courtesy of the Brella Sports Network. We will be right back. Yo, just like that, we are back. John Saponaro, Matt Ibanez, Til Mets Do Us Part, live on YouTube, live on Twitter, like we are each and every single Wednesday at 5:30 Eastern time or thereabouts. Sometimes a little bit late this week, but the conversation has been great to this point. If you missed any of the show up until this point, don't worry. You can join us now, of course. Take us the rest of the way, the next hour or so. But if you want to go back and watch whatever you missed, you can do that as soon as we end the live broadcast here, it will live forever on our YouTube channel, which is appropriately called Til Mets Do Us Part. So it's a great way to catch up, whether you have to leave early, you came in late, some combination of the two. As soon as the live broadcast is over, you can go there, you can check us out. But the best way to make sure you never miss a live stream is to subscribe to the channel and turn notifications on so you never, ever, ever miss the opportunity to catch up with us live. And you got to subscribe if you want your comments to be seen, you want your questions to be answered. You got to make sure that you are a subscriber. Now, if you can't do that, I understand giving us 2 hours of your week, although we appreciate the ones who do. Not everybody can do that. Not everybody can do that all the time. So if you don't have that chance, you can listen to this starting tomorrow, wherever it is you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, all of those places. It drops as an audio podcast tomorrow. The only difference is you will not see our smiling faces. Ibby, before we get back into the Mets conversation, I'm going to use this comment from Keith, the media goon, as a segue for our friends over at Independent Safes. Keep Sprout in the Independent Safe, safe away from all the trades where no one can hurt you.
And I will also use another one. It's fantastic, but I also have to use Pantresis as well, who's saying, let's put Ibby's Wi-Fi in the safe, which I agree with. And I will be talking about that in a moment. Independent.
I think that's the only way. I'm sorry. I think that's the only way your Wi-Fi could get any worse is if you put it in you put the router in a safe and locked it. And then it's just like, all right, well, I can't get a signal out of there. There's no shot.
Well, at least at that point, I'd be putting it out of its misery instead of trying to overwork what it clearly can't do. Anyway, independentsafes.com. Independent Safes are protecting homes and businesses with secure residential and commercial safes, fireproof peace of mind in every corner. Visit independentsafes.com today for security that stands strong. And I think I will just echo the things that were just said. Brendan Sprout, lock him away, keep him nice and safe. I do think he helps us this year. My Wi-Fi, put it to rest, put it in the river because it's done. I need a new one. Working on it. And your super chats have done a fantastic job of potentially working my way that way. So thank you and shout out to everyone who's doing that so far. But independentsafes.com. Tell them Til Mets sent you. They'll hook you up.
Speaking of super chats, yes, first week that is available. Folks asked about it last week. They are up and running like it says underneath the logo. And we've got a lot of them. And shout out to everybody who wants to support the show and can afford to support the show in that regard. Like I said at the top of the show, we super appreciate it, pun fully intended. We appreciate all the support that you guys have given us for the last, God, what is it, 4 years plus now that we've been doing this show?
Going on 4 years. Yeah, going on.
Yeah, and we can't do it without you. And this is just, the next evolution in that. So we appreciate everybody who is willing to go with the super chat. We are going to get back into the second half of that question from Darren Rivera, but we're going to jump around on the super chats just for a second here. Bring up this one from Master Flip. Shout out to Master Flip with $4.99 saying, go with the in-house options for starting pitchers and improve at the deadline. Ibby, not a question, just a straight up comment, but I think Master Flip is right. Not that other people who are saying to do other stuff are wrong. I just think he's right in that this is what's going to happen more than likely. They are going to ride it out with what they have in-house, and then they are going to see what they need at the deadline, and then they are going to. That's why I'm very confident they will be aggressive in acquiring an elite arm, to James Rube's point from earlier, because if that's the thing that they need that they don't have, they'll spend resources then to get it. So Master Flip saying, go with the in-house options for now. Thank you for the super chat.
Thank you so much, Flip. And he's clearly having a great week because of the whole Vladdy watch. And Queens baseball is doing a huge victory lap and just pissing on the graves of the Blue Jays fans. That was a hilarious thing to take part in. But shout out to Queens baseball doing their stuff in the spaces over on Twitter. Thank you, Flip, for the $4.99. Much appreciated. And I agree with you. I think that they are going to go in-house and they're going to see what they have and then improve as the season goes along with small pickups here and there and then attack the deadline. It's a proper statement because it's one that I believe to be true.
Yeah, not much more you can say about that for sure. Let's segue into the other portion of that super chat from Darren Rivera.
And Blue Jays.
Yeah, this is a good one. A couple of different ways we can get back into it. First, Odd Villain says you go get Barrios and Vladdy at the deadline, but don't let me get ahead of myself. That would be some kind of deadline. I don't think that's necessarily going to happen, but
No,
you know,
I don't think so either.
hell knows. I think that'd be too much to take on at the deadline with Pete, with the uncertainty of, will Pete opt in and all that stuff and where the payroll's at, all that stuff. I'd love to see something like that happen. That'd be absolutely insane. Everybody be dancing in the streets. I don't think that's going to happen, but it's fun. You can get ahead of yourself. It's February. The baseball season hasn't started yet. Get ahead of yourself all you want. And then Yamid says, I don't really think the Mets are going to go after Vlad, but bringing back up that super chat, part 2 of it from Darren, do you think the Mets will really go after Vlad next season? Do you think, Ibby, the Mets will go after Vlad next season?
I think that everything is done with a purpose, and I think that they fought so hard to have Pete on a shorter deal because of the options that they have. And we talk about the Mets always being involved on given players, and if it makes sense from an age perspective and building sustainability. I know what Steve Cohen said this week, saying how you have to have flexibility. You don't want to hamper yourself when it comes to your roster with a lot of long-term deals. I understand that. I also understand that over the next 2 years, a large chunk of money is coming off of the books for our Mets, where a long-term deal does make sense. Now, do I think that the Mets are going to go hard after Vlad? I think that they will be involved. I wholeheartedly do. I think it makes a lot of sense too, hearkening back to what we talked about with Manny Gomez on this show when it came to the whole idea of the modern day Manny and Big Papi on this team with the likes of Soto and Vlad, and then you'd be able to have Lindor, starting that train, if you will, in the front to really get the locomotive of this offense moving, which would be incredible. It really would. And is it possible? 1,000% it's possible, because the Mets are always going to be involved because they have the most money. Now, that being said, do I think or believe that Vlad is going to get as much money as everyone thinks he is? I have to stay steadfast with this. I've been saying it for a while on this show. I will continue to, and I will eat crow. I'll eat all the crow if I am wrong. I still have to see if the game of baseball is going to throw away 10 plus years at this point of abandoning the position of first base to then pay someone. I know he's young. I get that. I know what he can provide. I know what he can be. I understand all of it.
He's a better all-around hitter than Pete Alonso, too.
I understand all of that, but I still have to see the game of baseball, even when the Mets, or if the Dodgers were involved as an example, which they won't be, but you never know. But if they were involved, it's like you have all the money. You can just pay the guy. I still have to see the game of baseball say, F it, I'm going to give this guy $400 million to play first base. Like I have to see it happen. I know everyone hears me say this, and they have said before that I'm off and I'm wrong. And maybe I am. Maybe I'm overthinking it. I don't know. But I also know that while I'd be ecstatic if this team did get a Vlad moving forward, I think the vibes would be incredible and through the roof to be moving forward with that on your team. But I also have to say, look, if you look at the last 4 years of Vlad, you can take 2 years as really, really dominant. You can take 2 years and say, I'm not sure. And you can take the 1 year, which was 2021, I think it was 21, where they played in the minor league park. And that was his best season in terms of overall stats. And you can say, is it fair to use those stats? I'm not trying to put the guy down. I'm just bringing up conversations that I guarantee you are happening in front offices when they're saying, am I going to give this guy this much money? It's going to be an absolutely fascinating thing to watch unfold. I really can't wait to see how Vlad Watch goes and how teams go about attacking him. There are going to be teams involved. There are first baseman needs for a lot of teams, and the Mets will be involved to some extent. I think they're after him. I am curious on if they have a cap, if David Stearns has a cap on a Vlad because he's a first baseman.
I think that's the thing. So I think a lot of people are misreading some of Steve Cohen's comments from the other day with regards to payroll and Vlad specifically. Steve Cohen, every year, he says, we don't want to spend like drunken sailors. We have to find payroll consistency somewhere. And then every year, he has a reason to go over it. Whether that comes to fruition with, giving Pete Alonso $30 million to get him back for one season, essentially, or it doesn't come to fruition, like trying to give a $300 million contract to Carlos Correa. Every year, he has the opportunity to say, you know what, no more spending. But then he is presented with a different opportunity to make the Mets the best team they can possibly be. And he says, fuck it. And he burns the money and he spends it. So I need to see Steve Cohen fully put the brakes on spending. You could argue even last year, in the first year of David Stern's tenure, where the Mets had a ton of, to borrow the football term, dead money on the books of players who weren't playing on their team that they were paying anyway. Yeah, the Mets didn't go all in free agency, but they spent a ton of money. I mean, Sean Manaea and Luis Severino and Harrison Bader, it all cost money. They needed to bring in people. And then at the deadline, again, there wasn't a great player to go out and get, but they did absorb contracts at the deadline. They were over the luxury tax threshold again. You know, Andy Martino talked about this massive pivot away from Pete Alonso. Oh, they signed Winker. Oh, they signed Minter. That's it. You know what they never did? They never signed a guy who definitively would play first base because they always kept the back door open for Pete to come back in. And they bent a little bit in the negotiations when you could argue that they didn't even have to, in terms of giving him $30 million this year to make him the highest paid first baseman in the league. He's not the best first baseman in the league, but he's the highest paid first baseman in the league. And I think that's what they needed to do in order to just get the deal done, to just bury it all. So that's Steve Cohen in a nutshell. As it relates to Vladimir Guerrero Jr., I think that he is a great talent, but he is not a generational talent. This is not Juan Soto that we're talking about. I do think that the Mets will be in on him. I do think there will be an upper limit. We talk about guys who don't have upper limits. There was no upper limit on Juan Soto. You saw that not just what the Mets signed him for, but where the bidding was. People can talk about all they want. The reports come out. All these GMs and people who were polled said Soto was the worst signing of the offseason because no player is worth that much money. That's true. No player is worth that much money, quite literally. But the market dictates it. And if the Mets didn't sign him for $765, the Yankees were going to sign him for $750. Or Toronto was going to sign him for $740. So I don't want to nickel and dime over $15 million, $20 million here or there. The bidding essentially started at $700 million. He's the player that had no upper limit. We talked about that with regards to the Pete Alonso negotiations. There was clearly an upper limit, as there should have been. Mets were able to get it done. Now, I think the upper limit on Vlad Guerrero Jr., because of his age, will be higher. But I do think there is an upper limit on him as far as negotiations are concerned. I think his age helps him tremendously, but I think his position and his body type, if we're being fair, hurts him. And that just is what it is. So, look, the only way first basemen get paid, even if you go back beyond the 10 years that you just outlined, they have to be the best hitter in baseball. Albert Pujols didn't get paid because he was a first baseman. He got paid because he was the best hitter in baseball, period. Miguel Cabrera got paid because he was the best hitter in baseball, period. And also because he played third base the year before and kind of got paid like a third baseman and then got moved over to first. But the point is, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. has all the talent in the world. He's shown it to be among the best hitters in baseball in terms of average and power and all of that. But Ibby, I don't think anybody would say to you that he is the best hitter in baseball. So I think it's clear there is going to be a ceiling on the negotiations. I think the Mets are going to be involved. I think they should be involved. I think they're fucking crazy to not be involved. But this is not going to go the way of the Juan Soto negotiations, where we're all sitting here and just watching the number get bigger and hoping that the Mets are just in it till the end and they're going to go crazy to get him. I think the Mets will be in it, but I don't think it's going to go the way the Soto negotiations are, because let's face it, as good as Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is, he's not Juan Soto.
Yeah, and I see like a comment over here I wanted to bring up real quick. It was Rosie K saying, would the Mets be in for 500 over 10 years? I don't think so. I don't. Like in this one, I don't
think it's the 10 years. I think the problem is the $50 million.
Yeah.
$50 million a year is too much for that player.
for that position. Like, I don't think that
correct.
they want to, like, if I'm being honest here, like 100% honest, I would be more inclined to think that a David Stearns type of move wouldn't be to go after Vlad. I would think it'd be more of, I'll play Kyle Tucker in center field for 2 years and pay him, then move him to right when Soto eventually moves towards the infield or DH. Like, that's what I think is more likely. Now, is that going to happen? Probably not. But the point I'm trying to make is, like, what I think is, I have to see David Stearns want to pay a first baseman that kind of money. And that's where my hesitation is. I'm not going to complain at all if he's on my team. Like, I'm not advocating to say don't sign the guy. I'm just speaking from the standpoint of, I have a hard time, from everything I've read and seen about David Stearns to this point. He attacks age, and he speaks about that, saying you want to pay a player at a time where you think that they are still ascending, so you continue to get more. And I agree with that 1,000%. But it also comes into play the position that they are at. And I want to see this type of president of baseball ops go to the route of paying that much for a first baseman. I question it. I do.
The other thing I want to say on this, you know that I'm listen, there's so many great people in this Mets content creator space, and we've had a myriad of them on the show, and we've collaborated with shows, and did a show yesterday with all the folks, Carson, Andrew, and Frank over at Mets Weekly. Keith from Shea and Sons was in our comments here today in the chat. So shout out to all of those folks, Joe DeMeo and Connor Rogers, everybody.
Yeah.
I have been listening a lot to Locked On Mets, Ryan Finkelstein, who does a great job, and he's been on the show a couple times as well, so shout out to him. I listened to his show from today talking about why he doesn't think the Mets will be in on Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And he cites things like payroll and, long-term. And, you bring up that comment from Rosie saying, $500 million over 10 years and stuff. And it's citing those kinds of things. The one thing that I'm going to disagree with, and you should go listen to it because it is a very good outline of where the thinking could potentially be. But one of the cases he makes it be, and this is where I fundamentally disagree with Ryan. I think Ryan is a great Mets fan, great breaker down of these situations. But the one spot where I disagree with him is he said that he doesn't think Vladimir Guerrero Jr. on a long-term deal fits the window of what the Mets are trying to do. And I think that is misreading the situation entirely, because his thought was, you still have Brandon Nimmo here for 5 more years after last year, and you still have the rest or after this year, and you still have, Lindor going into the, the downside of his career at some point on a long-term deal and all this stuff. And so you're better off just spending less money to bring back Pete to go along with that window. And you guys know on this show, the metaphor that I've been using for the entirety of this Vladimir Guerrero conversation as it relates to Juan Soto is, you sign Juan Soto at 26. He fits the window now, but then he is a part of the bigger solution moving forward. He's 26 years old. The Mets window was closing before it ever even was opened, as all of their talent was either unsigned and on the other side of 30 or on the other side of 30. When you sign Juan Soto, who's 26, and you pair him with Mark Vientos, who's 24, and Francisco Alvarez, who's 23, and some of the prospects you hope that'll pan out, whether it's Acuna or Williams or Mauricio, all in their early 20s, and you have a bunch of starting pitching prospects, some to different levels of whatever you think they might be, but whether it's the Brandon Sproats and the Jonah Tongs, or it's the Blade Tidwells to a lesser degree, you have a lot of young talent hopefully coming up through the pipeline. What you're going to need is a little bit more young stability. And how do you get young stability? You sign the 27-year-old first baseman. And you look at the Mets payroll this year, the Mets payroll is just a scotch over $321 million this year. When you look at their payroll commitments for next year, Now, this doesn't factor in certain things with options and arbitration and money you have to set aside, but their payroll is $321 million right now. Starting next year in terms of actual commitments in 2026 is $254 million and change. 2027, it goes down to, as soon as this thing wants to load, it froze on me. These are courtesy of Spot Track, by the way. Their 2027 payroll, which will not load, that's wonderful. But anyway, the point is that the payroll continues to go down and down and down. So the Mets would be able to have another, let's say, $30 million-ish contract on the books. I don't think it's prudent to give him $50 million, but I think you could give him 35. I think you can give him even touching around 40. And I don't think that's an insane number to get to for a player with that kind of talent that you could pair with Juan Soto, you could pair with Mark Vientos, you could pair with Francisco Alvarez going forward. So, I think you're muted.
I know Jeff Passan came out and he was on a podcast saying that he doesn't have the exact numbers, but he knows that Vladimir Guerrero Jr. turned down a lot, and then he took a pause and then said again, a lot of money when it came to this extension. So I don't know if that's because the Jays went really over the top to try to close this, or if it was a lot of money in terms of what a first baseman gets now, and he still thinks he deserves more, so he's going to hit free agency. And I know Passan keeps on using that Juan Soto's contract changes a lot of things for a younger player. I think context matters here. I think position matters. And let's be honest, Vlad is not Juan Soto. I love Vlad as a player, but he is not the same ilk of player. He is not that much of a difference maker that Soto is. Soto took, again, teams he goes to, he changes the overall outlook completely for them. The Yanks were a non-playoff team, then they went to a World Series. Do other things factor in? Yes, but the stats he put up sure as hell helped them get to where they wanted to be and helps them in the playoffs because he's the one who provided the most offense for them in that spot. So not the same player. Until I see Vlad do that, I can't say that he deserves a large end contract like that. Like I said, either way, love him as a player, would love him as a Met. Not going to say that I don't want him, but it's going to be a fascinating watch from the first base perspective.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Armand, pulling up, and apologies, by the way, I don't know what happened to the website over there at Spot Track. It just stopped loading for 2027 Mets payroll. It gave me everything I wanted for 2025, 2026, and then it wouldn't load. Maybe that's because the CBA runs out and they don't want to tell anybody where payrolls stand. No, I obviously know that's not the case, but it just kind of just locked up. But anyway, Armand saying 15 years for 80, that's 32 million in AAV, add an opt-out after the 5th year, plus a signing bonus and maybe deferrals in a contract for Vladdy. Something like that. I could easily get behind. It's the 32 million in AAV that I think is really, like that's the ballpark. He's not getting 50 million a year. It's just not going to happen. That's insane.
No, it blows out of the water what the highest watermark was at that point for a first baseman. So it's like people go to these crazy numbers because they think this is what he's going to get because of his age. But I still say 30 million for Pete this year is wild because he's not better than the other first basemen who are making less, the Freemans or the Olsons of the world. And that's just me being honest. It's the truth. But thinking that he's going to go well beyond that and get, 40 to 50 plus million a year, I have a hard time with it. I really do. And I like him as a ball player, but I have a hard time seeing someone jumping that high. If anything, it starts at 35 a year.
Yeah.
36 a year. And it's not going right to 15. It's going to 8 because that's where it's supposed to be for first baseman at this point. And if someone says, well, Olson got 8 years at 162 and my client is worth a lot more than that and he's younger and blah, 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 blah. Sure. Okay. Now you can then maybe bump the AAV and go from 8 to maybe 10, and then you can have a conversation and go from there. I just have a hard time with everyone automatically jumps to the 400 million stratosphere. I'm like, I think you're going too high.
Well, and here's
you're going too high.
Here's the thing. I know there's the report that he turned down $340 million from Toronto. That is an insane amount of money. But also, what were the terms? Like, how long of a deal was that? It's like when Soto turned down the Nationals deal, and you look at the AAV on the Nationals deal, and it wasn't great. You know, the total contract number was $400 and something million, but the AAV wasn't anything that was like, oh my God, this guy's the best player in baseball, the best hitter in baseball, whatever. So one, what was the AAV? Two, no one wants to play in Toronto. Now, you're going to make the argument, well, you give them 340 million reasons to play in Toronto. But if they're not going to be good and their roster is going to be in shambles and they're going to be directionless, like, you also want to win. You also want to be on a contender. You want to, and listen, for as much talent as Toronto has had, even with Vladimir Guerrero Jr., I mean, they've been kind of more pretender than contender. They've never gotten over the hump. Nothing that they've done has worked. Oh, and by the way, the Rogers group that owns them has so much fucking money. They could play with anybody. They could be spending like the Dodgers if they wanted to. They're one of the biggest metropolitan markets in the world. And they've got so much money, but it still hasn't worked. So I don't care what the dollar amount is. I wouldn't be in a fast hurry to sign with Toronto in this situation. Shout out to Carson here. We talked about Carson a lot. And of course, like I mentioned before, we were on Mets Weekly last night, did a little bit of a collab. We graded all of the offseason moves, the major ones that the Mets made. So shout out to Carson and Andrew and Frank over at Mets Weekly, saying Alonso needs to match 2022 to consider himself part of the next window. He's got a second chance at life this winter, and then follows it up by saying, right now I'm looking past him and going for Vlad. Lindor, Soto, Vlad can chest up to Ohtani, Betts, and Freeman. I'm not passing that opportunity up. Sorry, Peter. And I know that's probably an oversimplification because it takes all of the money out of it. But Ibby, isn't that the point? Isn't the point to try to compete with the best teams in the league and win championships? And he's right to use the words. It does chest up to Ohtani, Betts, and Freeman out here in LA.
I mean, it also, remember, you're also trying to chest up to the ones in your division. And I keep
with
on
the Braves.
saying, it's the Braves. Like you're chesting up to the likes of Ozzie Albies, Austin Riley, Matt Olson, Ronald Acuna Jr. Like they're endless when it comes to talent. So I still think people are sleeping on them way too much. And I know Carson doesn't because he respects him like I am iterating right now. But I understand it completely, and it makes all the sense in the world. I just think it's going to be very curious as to what he gets because of his position, and also how this team views what they're going to do at Juan Soto towards the later years of said contract. Because I've said at minimum for the next 5 years at least, he's still going to be an outfielder. Whether people choose to, like front office execs and everyone's saying, oh, this guy's going to be on the infield, or he's going to be a DH in less than 2 years. It's like, no, he's not. Like, they're going to keep him in the outfield until he's in his early 30s. I can guarantee that. I don't think they're going to be paying him what they're paying him to be a DH that soon into the contract. Unless things just bottom out completely, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't.
I'm sorry. I mean, you know how I feel about this because I've always given the Yankees so much criticism for Giancarlo Stanton. I don't believe in making a 28-year-old player DH. It's the same way people were like, well, you know, the Mets should sign Bregman and sign Pete and make Vientos DH. Like, I don't want a 24-year-old DH. Why would you have a guy, even if his ceiling is limited defensively, as Soto's is, as Vientos might be? Vientos worked his ass off to become a competent major league third baseman. And you're going to be like, oh, congratulations. Thanks for doing that. Anyway, you're the DH now. You're 24 years old. Shut up. No. So I'm not doing that with Soto. I'm not making a 28-year-old DH. That's insane. That's absolute madness to me. Jump back into the comments here. Odd Villain saying, Toronto is sugar-free New York. Following it up by saying, Toronto is Buffalo with more shit to do. Two good ways to describe Toronto. I may have said it on this show in a similar context, but to me, I've always said that Toronto is like, it's got all of the problems that New York and London have with none of the charm of either city. So I'm with you, Odd Villain. I don't really love Toronto. It gets a little bit on my nerves. Kenthal saying, better average hitter, talking about Vladimir Guerrero. Alonso blows him away in run production, home runs, except last season. in a very inferior league. Yeah, I mean, the run production thing, it's a byproduct of the lineup sometimes and things like that. And obviously like Alonso's run production would have been higher if he himself last year was better in run producing situations. But the fact that Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is a significantly better average hitter, Ibby, I think is where you just say Vladimir Guerrero is just an overall better hitter. I mean, if he's going to hit 35 home runs and bat 320, that is significantly different than, Alonso hitting, 45 home runs and hitting 220.
And remember, like I always say, it's about resetting where you were. Like, you may have gotten the best years out of Pete. The idea of a player like this is resetting to, can I get the production in a lineup like that they're trying to construct if they went after a Vlad, to then get that 2019 version moving forward when it comes to overall production from Vlad, like I got from Pete at the age of 27 moving forward. Like I said, Stearns looks for guys that are going to be still on the up as opposed to going down. And we said we are trying to grow with Soto and Vientos and, aid the back end years of Lindor and Nimmo at the same time, but you're trying to build said sustainability. So I understand wanting to go for a player like that. I just think it's going to be very, very fun to watch from a first base perspective.
I got this one from Brad, who says Vlad is trying to be looked at as a third baseman to get more money. Now, obviously, I think that ship has sailed a bit now that they didn't sign Alonso and some of the other things that happened in their offseason. Vlad Guerrero Jr. is going to be their first baseman. But the reason why I bring this up, baby, is because I think the fact that he was even on board with that shows you that some of the stuff he's talking about in terms of money is a bit of posturing, because he knows to get more money, he has to be seen as a third baseman. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's all part of it.
Yeah, I think he's trying to just show that his overall value is more than just 1B, and he thinks he has to do, maybe he's looking at it saying, can I get a Rafi Devers type contract if I prove that I can play third base as well as first, but then add a little bit more because I'm younger? Maybe that's the way he's looking at it. And of course, we'll save Rafi Devers for another day with all the nonsense that's going on in Boston. This isn't a Boston show, but that's a whole nother conversation of insanity.
Jumping back in here with Ken Thal saying 2023 Alonso hit over 40 home runs, over 100 RBIs. Who cares? He hit 220. Listen, I don't want to misconstrue what I said. I have been the type of person here who says it doesn't matter if he hits 220. The important things that Alonso needs to do is hit home runs and drive in runs. So I agree with you there. I'm just saying it is indisputable that Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is a better overall hitter than Pete Alonso. He does more things well, more consistently than Pete Alonso. I don't think that's being unfair, Ibby. I mean, you've been my partner for this entire 4-year run of this show and counting. I've always said that people are like, Pete Alonso's turning into Adam Dunn. I'm like, good. Adam Dunn was one of the most productive players in baseball.
Yeah. Ahead of his time.
Yeah. 3 true outcomes, sure. But like, people are like, oh man, all he does is walk, strike out, and hit home runs. Well, yeah, but he had a 400 on base percentage with 40 home runs and 110 RBI. That is,
I'll take that from Pete.
I'll take that from Pete. He can hit 170 if he does that. It doesn't matter. Yeah. That's going to be super productive. So that I'm not poo-pooing, or I'm not suddenly all on the batting average train here. But like Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is just that he's a better overall hitter than Pete. Am I off base when I say that?
I don't think so. And I think a lot of people just look at the home runs and RBI totals. I think as an overall player, I think Vlad has a higher upside. And I understand where people are looking at the numbers from 19 to now and saying, well, look at the homers and RBIs in comparison to a Vlad. And I even called him out for the 2 years versus the other 2 years and saying how maybe we have to question some things based off of how he might get paid, which I still stand true with. But it comes back to contracts now are not about what you've done for me. It's about what you're going to do for me moving forward. That's how guys get paid these big contracts. And that's why older players get frozen out, because teams are no longer saying, I understand that you were at one point the best at whatever it is that you were the best at, but I'm not going to pay you for that because I don't think you provide that for the next 5 years, for the next 7 years. Like, that's what this is all about. To your point before, Albert Pujols got paid at the time that he got paid from the Angels because they saw what he was. But at the same time, they probably look back and regretted a little bit for the overall money that they had to put forward, mainly because they didn't get the same exact player that the Cardinals got on the front end. And that's where things like this come into play, and they question, am I going to give this player X amount of money? Now it's, what are you going to provide for me over these next few years? Am I getting proper ROI? That's how you're going to get paid. And that's why older players get frozen out like Pete did so far this season, and why I think a player like Vlad fits better for teams that are willing to pay contracts moving forward.
Yeah, very, very well said. And this is a good one from Truro saying Vlad and Harper, Vlad Guerrero Jr., Bryce Harper, have very comparable numbers. I think anyone here would sign up for Harper production over Alonso. And I think thank you for pulling that up, but that's kind of where my argument is. Bryce Harper is also a better overall hitter than Pete Alonso. I'm not going to get bogged down in the nitty gritty of which years Pete hit for which average. I know I kind of started it, but like, Ken, to your point here, 3 years ago, Pete hit 260, Dunn and Schwarber don't. Like, I get it. It's not, I'm not blaspheming by saying I think Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is a better overall hitter than Alonso. He just is. I watch him with my eyes. I see him be that, and I don't really know, what other, definitive way I can come up with that. Maybe I'll pull up their baseball reference pages and compare them to each other or whatever. But, that's some Mike Francesa kind of snooze fest stuff. So, Ibby, this is from Unknown saying, hello, Mr. Ibanez, doing a good podcast. And then later on said, give me a shout out, read my comment, which was that aforementioned comment. So there you go. Maybe one of your students.
Am I frozen? Where am I?
You're talking. You're fine.
Okay, I know it's a little bit choppy. That is one of my students. Again, he frequents. He always asks me, Mr. I, is today your podcast? Are you going to be on? I'm going to be there. I'm going to be watching. So shout out to you, Amari. I appreciate the support, even though you are a Yankee fan. I do appreciate that you come in here and mix it up and show love to the channel. So thank you.
There you go. Jumping back here into the comments. I know you mentioned this in a comment back. This one from Ronald saying, the one unpredictable aspect is the 2027 CBA negotiations and any new penalties. This really has to do with Vlad Guerrero Jr., but as we sort of segue away from that, just in general, where the Mets payroll is going to be, what it might look like, all that stuff. It is a factor, Ibby. Like, we don't know if there's going to be a work stoppage in 2027 or before the 2027 season, because the CBA is up at the end of 2026. And we can all debate what is broken with baseball. Some people think it's because the big teams spend too much money. The people who know what's going on know it's because of the, 22 teams that don't spend any money. That's more of the problem. But either way, there is a problem, and it will need to be addressed. And we don't even know, are we going to have a salary cap? Are we going to have more punitive salary, luxury tax thresholds? Who knows what it's going to look like in 2027?
Yeah, I think we should start getting our guest list ready for 2027, because I think we're going to be, having a lot of people on talking about random stuff, because I do expect a stoppage to happen, because it doesn't seem like it's going to get. I think it's going to get really ugly, and it will be interesting to see how contracts go from the long-term perspective with that hanging over everybody's head. I definitely agree with Ronald that it can play a role in all of this. But no matter what, I think we are, steamrolling towards a work stoppage, which sucks. But I do think it is going to happen, unfortunately.
I do too. I'm in the Truman Quinn camp. No cap, raise the Cohen tax. I did tweet something out earlier today with regards to, the Marlins are going to have to start making some moves, because they have like $79 million committed in payroll, and they have to get to at least $105 million so that they're not penalized for being too low. And to be honest, one of the things I said is you need to create, at the very minimum, you have to create several thresholds, the way there are 3 thresholds for going over certain financial numbers. On the high end, I think there should be several thresholds for being too low on the low end. And I think the penalties should be as punitive as they are for the teams that go over. I just think there needs to be an equal and opposite reaction. If you're going to tax a team at 110% on their payroll after going over the third luxury tax and being a repeat offender, well, you know what, Ibby? Then I want there to be a tax for a team that spends $40 million in payroll. That is crazy. Like, you have teams out here spending $40-50 million when they're receiving, half of that or more in luxury tax and what do you call it? Revenue sharing. It's insane.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just all of it is just, it sucks all around, and I'm not looking forward to it. And I think, we're going to get a lot of Evan Drelich on our timelines moving forward, because he's the one who breaks down all that stuff. And he's mentioned already before that it's going to get ugly and it's not going to be pretty. And when he speaks, I listen, because he is tuned in and locked in with all of that stuff. So if he's saying that now and we're 2 years out, like, unless a lot of dramatic things change over this amount of time, which I don't expect it to happen, I think everyone's going to be digging their heels in big time, and it's going to be unfortunate for us baseball fans, struggling to, find things to talk about as content creators, but as baseball fans, just waiting for the game that we love to come back.
This one near and dear to me and Keith. Not necessarily you, Ibby, but saying, I hope the MLB and MLBPA negotiations go better than the WGA and SAG did. Yes. As somebody who is in one of those unions, I hope that it goes better and lasts shorter than those negotiations went. But I don't see that being the case. I think it's going to be nasty. Carson's add a salary floor, a deferral cap, knee Moreno and Fisher in the groin. Ban every player named Jeff. There you go. Problem solved. I did want to bring something up because you mentioned Jeff, and I see Klink is here, and Klink told me that one of the things you want to talk about was the whole changing of the bat aspect of Jeff McNeil, which I thought would be funny. And his comment here saying John would even take those done stats for McNeil. Of course we would. It would prove that he's actually providing something as opposed to duck part singles. But besides that, John, do you have a stance? Do I have a stance?
Do you have a brand new do you have an idea, or do you have a stance on the brand new bat with an actual knob now, not the Dove no handle stick that he swung?
Okay.
Are you excited for the Jeff McNeil bat? You want to talk about Francesa levels of boring? This might be, and that's no shot at you, Klink. That's not a shot. It's just I knew that John would react this way. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. Jeff McNeil. Okay, he's got a new bat. All right. Whatever. Is he gonna get hits? All right. Is he gonna get hits? Jeff McNeil? Is he gonna throw his helmet down like a baby every time he grounds out 34 miles an hour? Okay. No, dude, I don't care. I can't like the dude, like everything was made of like, oh, this guy's got a handle. He's got no handle on his bat. Like, okay, that was cute when he was hitting 320. 330, whatever, and winning batting titles. Then didn't he already switch bats like 2 years ago, and then that didn't work, so he went back to the one with no handle, or did I make that up?
Did. No, I think it happened, but I think it was abbreviated. Like it was like a couple of games, and then he went back. Like I think that's what it was. Yeah.
I don't know, dude. Swing a regular fucking bat, swing a golf club, swing a tree trunk that you chisel into a bat like it's a fucking Bugs Bunny cartoon. Just for the love of Christ, hit the ball hard. I'm so tired of Jeff McNeil hitting fucking 40-mile-an-hour ground balls to the left side of the infield and people telling me he's unlocked something. In the second half of the season, he unlocked something. He was good for like 2 weeks after the All-Star game, and then he got hurt. I don't understand why people are sitting here telling me how good Jeff McNeil was in the second half, Ibby. He didn't even fucking play that much, all things considered. And he was partially replaced by Jose Iglesias, who was singing songs and batting 340 and was on a minor league contract. Like, I can't with Jeff McNeil, man. I can't. I don't care what kind of bat he uses. I don't care. And this is not to shame Klink's comment.
No, not at all.
I like Klink, and I'm happy you brought it up the way you did. But my God, thank you, Silly Mazzilli. Nice, Francesa. I wish I had a Diet Coke. I really do. I wish I had a Diet Coke and Sweeney Murdy to put me to sleep, but I don't. Look, Truman Quinn saying McNeil gets 90 days to prove himself. To me, fine, sure. I mean, they're gonna give him all the rope in the world because his contract is unmovable. Unmovable. He makes almost $16 million a year. Oh my God, I wish I could be that mediocre and make $8 million a year.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to monologue, but Jesus Christ.
I wanted to make sure Clink got his thing because he sent me that DM. And I want to make sure that he got his segment in there. So shout out to you, Clink. Hopefully you got a good laugh on that one. I knew it would provide. I didn't know he was gonna bring out the glasses like that, but hopefully it brought.
I just had them handy. I would have taken off my hat too, but I worked out earlier and I look like a weird mess. And since this is a video show, I'm not doing that. I'm too vain to take off my hat right now. Armand just clapping it up, John. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I heard McNeil is switching to a cricket bat. Like, sure. Like, really anything. Literally anything. He could play. I don't know what it's called. That fucking thing they play highlight with. I don't know.
I don't know what that is.
Is that the highlight? Is it the stick thing they use? Switch to that thing. He's so bad.
Just hit the ball. Just hit the freaking ball.
What? Like, okay, Ibby. Look, we have like a couple minutes left. We have like 11 minutes. I think we gotten everything before I go off on this tangent. Have we gotten to
the only thing I wanted to hit on was just like the overall, like I'll say some things real quickly that I wanted to get out right away. And that was, I know Alonso said his piece about the offseason, about free agency. I know that he used verbiage that was very similar to that of Scott Boras. Bridge contracts, bridge deals, next things, wanting to do better, wanting to prove that you have to provide in the now if you want to get paid. He said all the right things. I don't think there was any ill will, nothing to really look into. I think he's going to go out there and have a good season. And then, of course, like I've been saying, it's going to be a swan song for him. The other thing I did want to hit on was just the overall vibes of the spring. But we can end on that with basically the Soto arrival and the overall vibes. I'll let you torpedo the person you want to torpedo right now, and then we'll end on a solid note.
I'm so tired. Look, everybody who watches this show and listens to this show, they know how I feel about Jeff McNeil as a baseball player. So I don't need to relitigate the fact that his extension was one of the dumbest extensions ever given. Like, I've already said that. I've already said the things. If you guys follow me on Twitter, you know that I've said it. I just want to say, Ibby, I am so tired of having conversations with people who are going to argue that he provides value on this team. He does, in that he's a Major League Baseball player, right? Like, obviously there are people who you would rather have way less at second base than Jeff McNeil, right? Like, we've talked about how, like, I can't even name the players on the infield for the Seattle Mariners outside of J.P. Crawford, who only had one good season. So, but I just can't fathom when I'm like, this guy needs to hit 300, otherwise he's not good. And people are like, that's crazy. I'm like, no, look at the numbers. And they're like, yeah, but then when he did this, and then when he changed bats, and then, no. Like, and I don't even know. I don't even know where I want to go with this. So I'm just going to leave it with these two comments, because I think these two comments sum it up better than I ever could, because I'm too angry to sum it up. Truman Quinn says, when you get better players, the weaker ones stick out. Yeah. Like, the Mets are really good. The Mets have Juan fucking Soto and Francisco Lindor on their team.
Comment.
And people are just like, yeah, but, you know, the key could really be Jeff McNeil. Like, what? The key to what? If he's the key, what's the fucking lock?
Not an independent safe, I can tell you that much.
No. And then this one from Odd Villain. Baseball boomers love him. Yes, that's the other thing. Now, not everybody who loves Jeff McNeil is a boomer, but there are certainly a lot of people who are, that just think that this is like 1970s baseball. And they're like, this guy's really valuable. I'll tell you, like, he's not like Jeff McNeil. Did I hit that mute button in time? I sneezed.
You did. Bless you.
I'm a damn pro. Okay. Jeff McNeil, he's just like, he's like a player who should have like he should have like a nickname like Rabbit Moranville. You know what I mean? Like he's so past the point of his usefulness. Like Jeff McNeil would be Jeff McNeil would be the best player on a baseball team before Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier, if you know what I'm saying. Jeff McNeil, and I don't think Jeff McNeil also gives me the vibes of somebody who wouldn't before Jackie Robinson be on the team, but that's a sidebar. Okay, I'm done.
Yes, I can imagine Branch Rickey walking up to McNeil and saying, "You just lost your job to Jackie Robinson." Oh, well, wait a minute. We got someone in the comments. We got to get back on the show. Joe Prano jumping in here. What up, Joe? Jeff McNeil is just going to be a supremely expensive bench piece, but I'm okay with that because Steve Cohen is supremely rich. He's our Chris Taylor. I think Chris Taylor's a lot better than Jeff McNeil, but I understand the point.
Doesn't Chris Taylor play third base, shortstop, second base, center field, left field, right field?
And a better hitter and overall play. Yes, he does. Yes.
Yeah, I love Joe. And I do
Joe
see
too.
what he's saying because it doesn't matter because whatever, like with Cohen's money.
Right. It doesn't matter if you have a $15 million bench bet. It doesn't matter.
Listen, if Jeff McNeil was this exact player but played all those positions I just listed, I'd be fine with it. But he doesn't. He can't play shortstop. You're never going to put him at first base. He can't or doesn't want to play third base. He can play the corner outfields, I suppose. He can't play center field. But also, why would you put him? Why would you put him in left field or right field when you have 6 natural outfielders on the team? Brandon Nimmo, Jose Siri, Juan Soto, Jesse Winker, Tyrone Taylor, and Starling Marte are all going to be on the team. Why would Jeff McNeil and his 12 fucking home runs ever play left field? I just don't get it.
Like I said, if Jeff McNeil is playing left field, we have a problem. There's a much bigger problem going on with this team that is really putting us on a track that we don't want to be on, worse than the one people feel like this team is already on because of the pitching injuries. But to segue into spring training, games start soon. It's exciting times. I just wanted to say that Juan Soto showing up on Sunday put the biggest smile on my face. This was my ending point on Mets Weekly last night. I will reiterate it here. I haven't stopped smiling, looking at guys, playing, in shorts, playing on the backfields, just yucking it up and having a good time and just overall fun. The vibes feel exactly like they were from last year, which everyone was worried that you're having a lot of changeover and all these things happen. You're going to lose something. No, it finally feels like this team really, really found its footing, that Lindor has truly found his calling as a leader and is at the front of all of this. It finally feels like we have a respected and respectable team, which is something that we as Mets fans have always wanted. I am beyond amped up. And even if it's something as simple as watching Soto take first live BP today, doing the shuffle, ripping the ball, finding the gap, laughing it up with Jose Siri and Marte and all the guys just having fun. It feels different. It feels right. And the one thing I will say, the final point I will say, and I hate mentioning, and I'm not going to mention the name, I'm not going to mention the place because I don't do that because it's not needed. If you complain about a player like Juan Soto showing up, but he's wearing a spring training hat that you don't like because it has this face on it, and you think that it brings down the serious nature of the team, you, my friend, need help, and it just shows how desperate you are for attention. Spring training is meant to be fun. Spring training is about the kids. Spring training is, yes, about selling hats like this. Mr. Met is part of the fabric of this team. It matters. I should say, it doesn't matter that he's wearing said hat. It doesn't take away from the magnitude of what this team is now with a player like Juan Soto. So please take that nonsense, bag it, don't need it. Get excited, Mets fans. It's going to be a great season.
I cannot believe that was a thing that actually happened. It shows manufactured BS. You know, we all have our opinions about uniforms and all this stuff and who likes this, who likes that, who doesn't like that, blah, 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 blah. But it's from a different standpoint. It comes from like, you know, oh, I want to see more gray, or I don't want to see the black jerseys because the gray ones are the traditional ones, or I want to see this, I want to see that. And we could disagree, and we could disagree with the merit of whether or not, you know, teams should go in these directions or whatever. But like, the one thing that we can all agree on, regardless of the sport, is that it doesn't actually affect the players on the field. So to sit there and say that you are a Mets fan, but your excitement for signing what is going to turn out to be the best signing in the history of the franchise, that your excitement has been dimmed because of the spring training hat. I can't understand how that would bother you to that degree. Like, look, Joe's saying, I'd rather our players wear Mr. Met heads than black jerseys. But again, Joe's not saying, I know he's joking. He's being hyperbolic when he says it, but he doesn't like the black jerseys, and that's fine. But that's Joe's fine. Not saying that Juan Soto wearing a black jersey ruins Juan Soto being on the Mets for him, which is what that person said, which is actually insane. And you know what? Yeah, silly Mazzilli. Let's put McNeil's face on the cap wearing some aviator glasses. I love that. Clink saying, wasn't screwing with you, sent the video because I knew you'd react this way, and that's what I wanted to hear. Plus, didn't know John did a mean Francesa impression. I didn't know I did a mean Francesa impression either. I just I don't know. I guess I listened to him a lot. I thought it was like mediocre, but thanks to everybody who said it was good. Look, in all seriousness, the Clink, I know, found us through like retweets and stuff. Like, that's something that we want to do on this show. Like, we have a lot of serious talk that we want to get to when things are serious and need to be addressed. But honestly, it'd be for the last 15, 20 minutes of this show this week, just having fun with the commenters, having fun with, the people in the chat and stuff, because we're kind of done. We could have ended 15, 20 minutes ago, but that's what this show is. It is, it's what it always was meant to be. With Ibby always says it's a therapy session for Mets fans. Absolutely. But it's also meant to be fun. It's also meant to be, let's get that weird stuff out, and not in a clickbait kind of way, but me and Ibby will take it to places that some other people in this space, and I'm not talking down on anybody, but may not take it. We're not, we're two people who express ourselves the same way that other people express themselves the way that they want to, but Ibby and I express ourselves the way that we want to. And, we're unapologetic about the way that we do. And, we think that what makes this show great is the fact that it is, me and Ibby being ourselves. We don't try. We're not like contriving, debates. And again, I'm not saying anybody else is, but if you want that stuff, like, where to go. You can go to the First Takes. You can go find Skip Bayless. You can go find Stephen A. Smith and find two people yelling at each other for 30 minutes. Like, we don't want to do that. We want to agree when we agree naturally, disagree when we disagree naturally. And we will get to talk about the Mets playing actual games next week. This one from Douglas Barnes. Let's go. So it's been a fun year to this point. It's been a fun offseason. The offseason is over. Spring training is here. Games start next week. It is going to be absolutely fantastic. LFGM. Ibby, you got anything else you want to say before we get out of here?
I got nothing else to say, man. I am pumped up. Like I said, I keep on watching this stuff here because it's freezing. The guys are having a great time down there. Spring is Spring is gonna be sprung soon. Hope springs eternal. A lot of good vibes. I'm excited to watch the guys play. I can't wait to keep on breaking it down, and I'm excited for the 2025 season. Let's go Mets, baby. Let's go.
I'm John. That's Ibby. This is Til Mets Do Us Part, live on YouTube, live on Twitter, all courtesy of the Brella Sports Network. If you missed any of the show, you can go back and watch whatever you missed on our YouTube channel, which is appropriately called Til Mets Do Us Part. Subscribe, turn notifications on so you never, ever, ever miss an opportunity to know when we're going live and getting to be a full-fledged participant in the fun. And I do say fun with emphasis, bold, italic, underline, because we like to have fun over here on this show. Follow me at John Saponaro. Follow Ibby at Poison_Ibby. Follow the show at Til Mets Do Us Part across all platforms. That's on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. We will see you next week. Peace.